Yes. So today I'm going to talk about building and deploying your Angular app to Azure. Okay. Today you're going to spend a lot of time creating your application. For some of you, it's going to be the first time you're going to go and create a new Angular application. What I'm going to show you here is a way to deploy to the cloud. In this case, Azure. All right. It seems quite easy when you think about the deployment itself, but when you deploy to Azure, it's a bit tricky on the Angular side because Azure doesn't know Angular, so you have to tell Azure this is Angular. That's how you deploy it. My name is Thiago Passos. I'm a solution architect at SSW. This is my Twitter handle and my blog. I'm gonna post as soon as the video is online. I'm gonna post that on Twitter so you can check it out. If the video is good enough, then it's gonna go to SSW TV, but no promises there. So that's the agenda for today. What I'm gonna cover today is creating a brand new Angular app using the CLI. That's gonna be very quick. For those who are not familiar with Git, again, I'm just going to create a Git repository very quickly. I only have 15 minutes for my talk today here, so I'll have to do quite quickly. I'm going to set up the continuous deployment as well, or continuous integration in the Azure website. So you're going to see how that works. And then I'm going to create a custom build script. So I'm going to tell Azure how to build the Angular app. Okay. And after that, that's the last step. The last step there is not mandatory, but it's highly recommended when you deploy an Angular app to IIS, which is the Microsoft server, web server. Okay, so let's get started with that. So first, who here has used the Angular CLI? All right, so it's a big number. So you already know how to do an ng-new in the name of the app. So that's how you create a new app. So you go and you have to install the CLI. If you don't have Node, you have to install Node in the first place. But basically, you install the Angular CLI, and then you do ng and the name of your app, right? Once you do that, you get into the folder, and then you can do ng serve, which is basically going to build your application, and it's going to kick off the server itself. By default, it uses the port 4200. So it's as simple as that. So it can't be simpler than that, really. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my GitHub repository, create a new repository at the top there. And then I'm going to come back to my folder, and I'm going to init the Git repository locally, and I'm going to add everything, commit, and I'm going to add that Git repository that I just created on GitHub. So this is basically to push my whole code to GitHub. All right. So I will need that so I can go to Azure and connect to this GitHub repository so it kicks off the continuous deployment. Okay. It doesn't need to be GitHub. You can put on VSTS, or Azure supports a bunch of Git repositories. So just go and check it out. But yeah, it definitely can go private or public. It doesn't matter. Okay, so the next step is setting up the continuous deployment. So what I'm going to do here basically is I'm going to Azure. So that's the Azure portal for some of you who doesn't know. So it's very simple. You go to the Azure portal, click on the plus button there, search for web apps, and then you start your web app. Then just follow the wizard. So you create a new app, you name it, and then you go ahead and configure the continuous deployment, which is going to the deployment options in there, and then in the button at the top. And that's as simple as that, right? So when you go there, you choose your source, you select GitHub. As I said, there are multiple places that you can set up the continuous deployment. So there are just a few to mention. In this case, I'm using GitHub. So when I click there, since I'm already logged in, it showed up my authorization there and my organization, which is my personal account. And then I'm going to choose the project. So when I go there, I choose the project. And when I click OK, it basically kicks off the build and the deployment, right? If obviously if the GitHub repository is empty, it's not going to do anything because there is nothing. But in this case, as I showed you before, I already pushed the whole code into GitHub. So it's going to kick off with the latest commit. Okay. So that's it. Now I'm going to set up the custom build script. In Azure, we have something called kudu script. Who's here heard about kudu? Right, just a few here. So the kudu is just it's an engine, an Azure engine to do the build. Okay, it's pretty handy, and what it does when you don't set up your custom script, and Azure picks up your GitHub repository, it tries its best to know what sort of project that is, and then it runs the default script to do whatever you need to do, right? But in this case, since Azure doesn't know Angular, we need to customize that build script so we can tell which steps you need to take in order to build and deploy your Angular app. Okay, so this part is pretty simple. So we're gonna do an npm install and install the kudu script locally, so we can generate this script and we can commit that script into our repository. Okay, so you do a kudu -y -- node because we're gonna use Node to build the Angular app. All right, and with that, it creates two files. It creates the .deployment, which is just a dummy file saying run the deploy.cmd, and we've got the cmd, which is the whole build and deployment script. Okay, it's a quite extensive script, but you don't need to worry about all that. We're gonna make just a few changes in here. First, in the deployment section, we're gonna check if we have the Angular CLI.json, which tells that repository is actually an Angular CLI repository. Okay, so if we do have that, all we're gonna do is just npm run build. Okay, so this run build is a step that comes from the package.json. We're gonna have a look at that. Actually, I'm gonna go in and show you that right now. So let me open Visual Studio Code here. Okay. All right, so what it does here, I'm just gonna show quickly how it looks. Can you all see the screen and the text? Yep. Cool. All right, so what we're gonna customize here is all this deployment section of the deploy.cmd, right? And what we're gonna do, basically, we're gonna tell kudu to run the npm install production. And what that's gonna do is gonna bring all the npm packages it's gonna install all the npm packages, but it's gonna install the production version, which is the minified and whatever. All right, after that, as I showed you before, it's gonna check if the Angular CLI.json is there. If it is, we're gonna run the npm run build, which I'm gonna show you in a sec. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this kudu sync process, and that's gonna basically copy the whole content of the this folder into the target folder. Because I don't know if you guys used the Angular CLI before, but when you do ng build, it creates a dist folder with the whole app, and it minifies, it does the tree shaking, everything, and puts in a dist folder, and that's all you need to run your application, right? And that's all we need to push into the website. That's all we need as the target code for our application. All right. And if we go now to the package.json, I think I'm going to cover that in the slides, but just so we can confirm here. Here are the scripts. When you do a npm run and the name of the command, it's going to bring from here, right? So in the deploy.cmd, we have the npm run build, and that's what's going to run basically. It's going to run a build. It's going to run this command, which is going to run the ng build -- prod. Does that make sense? Am I going too fast? Any questions?
I got loads, but
cool. Just stop me at any time if you want to ask anything.
Are these steps specific to only Azure, or can these steps be
be implemented in other than server than?
You can implement the same steps. So the question was if this can be used in all the environment or only Azure. So the npm run build is something that you can do anywhere as long as you have Node, and all the ng build -- prod, all these commands you can run anywhere. So if you do have a continuous integration tool, such as TeamCity, Jenkins, or any of that, you can definitely run that. Okay. The kudu script is specifically for Azure, but all the other commands you're gonna see here, you can run anywhere. Cool. All right, so let's just keep going here. All right, I showed you that, and I showed you that the npm run build, it's gonna run this command here. But the next thing we need to do is we need to tell Azure what the Angular CLI is, right? Because if Azure tries to run ng, it's just gonna crash. I don't know what ng is. So we have to tell Azure what ng is. Okay, and that's what that 2 lines are for. So we need to include in the dependencies the Angular CLI and the Angular compiler CLI. All right, because when it gets to Azure, Azure will know what the ng command is for. All right. Cool, and then as I showed you before, it's just gonna sync. It's gonna grab this folder and put in the target folder. Cool, so the last part, hopefully it's not that boring. The last part is when you have your Angular app, when you have multiple routes, I don't know if you guys noticed that. So that's not a mandatory step, but if you are doing IIS, if you're deploying that to Windows, that's highly recommended because you're gonna have issues in the future if you don't do that. So if you go from one route to another in Angular, you notice that it changed the address bar, right? But it actually doesn't navigate out of that. Okay, so it's all Angular working. Okay, but if you copy that URL and then you want to go to that URL straight away, if you just go to the address bar and hit enter, if you don't have that set up, it's gonna crash because it's gonna try to find a folder or a file in that directory and it's not gonna find. Okay, IIS is not gonna find, it's gonna crash. Hey, I don't know what it is. It's gonna give me a 404. And what I'm gonna do here now is I'm gonna tell IIS that if it is a directory or file, then run whatever that directory or file wants to do. Otherwise, just have it back to the home page. So Angular can take over the routing and then run that for you. And for that to happen, we need to update the Angular CLI.json to include the web config as an asset, and we need to add the web config into the source folder. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to just create a URL rewrite rule, which is basically doing here. We're going to match every single request. If it's a file or a directory, just go for that. Otherwise, fall back to the root folder. Okay. So I'm gonna show you quickly. I'm just gonna do a quick demo in Azure if I've got connectivity here. So if everything works as expected, I'll be able to go to my app. Okay, so that's a very, very simple app with 2 routes. Okay, so I can go so that's my home route. If I go to the home without the home in the URL, it's gonna fall back to home. If I go to contact, it just navigates to the contact, right? But just to prove you that, if I just copy the URL and go to another tab, it falls back straight to the contact. So that's what the IIS configuration is doing. Right? If I didn't have that, it would just break in there. Okay, so basically today I showed you how to create a new app, configure the continuous deployment, create an app in Azure, and I showed you some tricks to configure your IIS rewrite rule. Before I say thank you, that's the URL for my blog post that I'm covering all that I covered today. So if you want to spend some time today after you build your app to push to Azure, that's gonna be great. So again, that's my Twitter handle if you want to get in touch. That's it. Thank you very much.